What rips up and down mixed terrain, has clearance for 40mm tires, is within 3.3 watts of the Melee, has down tube storage, and is replacing one of my current bikes? You guessed it, the Enve Fray. In this video, we're going to talk Fray aesthetics, specs, performance, and my thoughts on how it rides after spending about 150 miles on it, value, and why I think you should consider it for your next road bike. So feel free to skip around as you see fit. So what the heck is the Enve Fray? To understand the Fray, I think you have to understand Enve's current bike lineup. Enve first launched the Melee in 2022 as their high-performance road bike. It was fast, cornered like it was on rails, super responsive on climbs, and had clearance for up to 35mm tires, which was a little bit ahead of its time in that regard. The following year, they launched the Mog, a proper gravel bike with fully integrated cables, down tube storage, and clearance for 50mm tires. The Mog felt like a gravel bike designed to sit kind of perfectly in the middle of the gravel bike spectrum, with its tire clearance and mounting points for lengthy adventures, while maintaining an aero profile and signature Enve look. So if you consider a spectrum of bikes, you have the Mog on one side and the Melee on the other. The Fray appears to land right in the middle, but I'd say that it actually leans a little bit more Melee than Mog. If I can put it into car terms, the Melee is an Audi R8, the Mog is an RS Q8, and the Fray, well, the Fray is an R6 Avant, built to be insanely fast and handle exceptionally well, all while hauling your gear on long road trips, giving you just enough versatility to make it your daily driver. The Fray's geometry is optimized for 31 to 35mm tires, picking up where the Melee leaves off. While it might be optimized for those sizes, it has clearance for 40mm tires on a 1x drivetrain and 38mm tires on a 2x drivetrain. Comparing it to the Melee, the stack is 2 centimeters taller, the wheelbase is 1.6 centimeters longer, and the head angle is 0.7 degrees more slack. And get this, despite the taller stack and increased tire clearance, based on Enve's wind tunnel testing at the Mercedes GP wind tunnel, the Fray frame only produces an additional 3.3 watts of drag, or an additional 4.4 watts when you add a rider. That's not a bad trade-off, and if you were really concerned about the additional drag, you could make up those watts through equipment or position tweaks. Aesthetically, the Fray is very on brand for Enve. In fact, when I visited Enve last July, I walked right past it 3 times and didn't even notice. Rumor has it that Alexi Vermillion even rode it at BWR last year, and it went totally unnoticed. You could easily mistake it for a Melee with its taller head tube and sloping top tube. Or maybe you'd mistake it for a Mog when you catch a glimpse of the storage compartment that's neatly tucked underneath the down tube bottle cage. The big giveaway will be the colors. The Fray is available in Salt, Ash, and Venom, colors that will immediately distinguish them from the Melee and the Mog. Salt is kind of a flat, eggshell white. Venom is a shiny, sparkling goldish greenish, and Ash is, well, ash. It's a glossy dark gray that reminds me of a darker version of Audi's Nardo gray. Generally speaking, it looks as you'd expect a modern road bike to look in 2024, and I think the taller head tube will play to an aesthetic advantage, eliminating mountains of spacers underneath of stems. The signature Enve look continues with fully integrated cables, drop seat stays, and it has a very aero profile front to back. One part of all Enve bikes that I like is the bearing cover. It looks so clean, and it's something that I've appreciated since I first saw an Enve custom road years ago. Fast forward to today, and we've seen it on the Melee, the Mog, and now the Fray. It's so sleek, it's such a critical point of the build. Enve also continues to keep the branding to a minimum. An Enve logo on the head tube, on the bottom side of the down tube, on the seat post, and the model name on the down tube. That's about it. The minimal branding is something I think most Enve owners appreciate. It's not a giant billboard like other brands. Look a little closer and you'll notice mounting points for bottles on the seat tube, down tube, on the underside of the down tube, and on the top tube, if you like bento boxes for easy access storage. You'll notice what Enve calls the cargo bay underneath the down tube bottle cage. Inside the 36 cubic inch or 0.6 liter cargo bay, you'll find 2 neoprene bags designed to go up and down the down tube, where you could store a small flat kit, a tool, plugs, a light, maybe a compact jacket. At least that's what I'd store, eliminating excess gear from your jersey pockets. The less I can feel like a Sherpa on a long ride, the better. The frame also has the size, stack, and reach painted on the down tube. So if you're ever caught off guard when someone rolls up and says, "Excuse me, sir, what's the stack and reach of that beauty?" Well, funny you should ask. It's SRAM UDH compatible, has mounts for fenders, uses a T47 threaded bottom bracket, shares the same D-shaped seat post with the twin bolt wedge design as the Melee, and is compatible with most 1x and 2x drivetrains, with the exception of SRAM and Campy 2x mechanical. If you're riding Shimano 2x, Enve recommends a 5339, 5236, or 5034. If you're riding SRAM 2x, consider a 5037, 4835, or 4633. And you 1x folks, you're gonna max at a 55-tooth chainring. It's also worth noting that it is not compatible with Shimano GRX 4831 and SRAM T-type or mullet gearing, which I don't think it's a big deal because I don't feel like this is a mullet gearing style of bike. And what's it like to ride? Well, I thought you'd never ask. And while this isn't a sponsored video and Enve has no say in it, they were kind enough to invite me out to Paso Robles, California last month to ride the Fray. Over 3 days, we spent time in what I would call the Fray's element. A mix of rough and smooth paved roads, light gravel, and fire roads in and around California's central coast. My particular Fray was a size 56, fully outfitted with SRAM red axis with a 4835 chainring and a 1033 red cassette. Now, whether intentional or not, this setup is second nature to me. Thanks, Enve. It had a set of SES 3.4s with 35mm SES road tires. It also had Enve's $1,200 integrated bar stem, the AR in-route one-piece handlebar, in 400 by 120mm. It felt just right all around, especially with the slight flare in the drops. They were perfect for gravel descents. And look, say what you will about the cost, it's an exceptional setup. Over 3 days and 165 miles of riding, I walked away impressed with the Fray. Impressed because it felt responsive and agile on road, yet forgiving on gravel. Enve seems to have found a sweet spot with this geometry where you don't feel like the bike is compromised on road, nor do you feel like you're positioned so far forward and low that you're gonna go over the bars in light gravel or on rough roads. On the second day, we started just outside of Paso Robles, riding through the rolling hills of California's wine country. When the pavement ended and the gravel began, I found myself wondering just how well the Fray would absorb the ruts and washes from the recent rainstorms. With its slightly longer wheelbase and more slack geometry, it rode through it all with confidence. At one point, I descended towards the coast with Alexi Vermillion and Logan Jones, all gravel with some fast sections mixed with sweeping bends and switchbacks. And you know what? The Fray felt super planted, never missing a beat, never trying to throw me over the bars. Like finding the right tool for the job. It simply worked, and it worked exceptionally well. Did it absorb gravel like a Mog with larger tires? No, it didn't, and I think here's where you have to manage expectations. Considering the Fray was outfitted with 35mm slick tires, it performed exceptionally well, remaining predictable while absorbing road and gravel chatter. With the tires inflated to 45 PSI, I found the ride to be comfortable without feeling like it was dull. Anyways, I digress. We climbed back over the coast from Morro Bay, and the Fray climbed a lot like the Melee, albeit with a feeling of having a slightly longer wheelbase. It seemed to float a bit more than the Melee. I think that's kind of a good way to describe it, really. It trades that razor sharp edge of the Melee for just the right amount of float on both the climbs and descents. And it's a fine balance. If the handling is too sharp, it suffers in the dirt. Too dull, and it's a slog on the road. Again, they seem to have nailed it here. But does it come at a cost, a literal cost? Well, let's talk about value. At $5,500 for frame, fork, seat post, and stem, or $5,950 with the one-piece bar stem combo, Enve has unapologetically priced their bikes to the top of the segment without really offering any like lower tier or lower priced options. What they do offer is the ability to choose your bar, stem, and seat post. And if you zoom in on the cost, it's actually $4,750 for the frame, fork, and seat post, which is a more apples to apples comparison with other brands. Add an additional $400 for bars and $350 for a stem, and you arrive at $5,500. Not an insignificant amount of money by any means, but I think it helps to understand the breakdown. The pricing is the same as they've done with the Melee, the Mog, and now the Fray. There's no denying that greater dollar for dollar performance can be found in frames in the $2,500 to $3,500 range, but the price point is on brand for Enve. They've always focused their priorities on producing an exceptional product, even if that comes at an additional cost. Take one spin on a set of 2.3 or 4.5 SES wheels, and you'll quickly understand the value of Enve products. I personally found that these types of higher end frames, they hold better value over time, especially if you're one who's buying a new frame and selling your old one every few years. It's a difference between trying to sell an Audi RS6 versus an S6 or an A6. The markets are flooded with the latter, but the former, there's simply fewer of them and therefore they demand a higher resale. Look, to each their own, but I think you have to look at the full life cycle of a frame to truly appreciate the value. So where do I land on the Fray? Well, if it's not obvious, I really like it, which isn't hard to do because there's a lot to like here. It manages to check a wide range of boxes, all while maintaining a high level of performance across mixed terrain. That makes the Fray kind of hard to categorize, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and simply categorize it as a modern road bike. Now hear me out. Yes, you have your race bikes like the Melee, but we don't always need a race bike. The Fray is the evolution of the road bike in the same way that we've seen cross-country mountain bikes evolve over the last few years. They've got increased travel and wider tire clearances, allowing riders to tackle more on a single bike, from racing to technical terrain. And so it is with the Fray, a slightly longer wheelbase, a little bit taller, slightly more slack, and more tire clearance. And guess what you get? A road bike that you can race on occasion, roll up to a fast road group ride, and tackle light gravel and mixed terrain rides. Again, that is what the modern road bike should be. And frankly, if you ask any bike fitter, they'll probably agree that from a fit and comfort perspective, it's the bike most of us should be riding. We often get caught up in this marketing loop of needing the most aggressive, fastest race bike on the market. I'm guilty of buying into it myself. But what good is a fast, aggressive road bike if you can't get into a comfortable position because the geometry is simply too aggressive? All those aero gains go out the window if you're sitting up and stretching your back every 15 or 20 minutes, or maybe you've got to take a break even. If any of that strikes a chord with you, the geometry on the Fray might be the solution you're after. And guess what? I bet you'll be faster as you're more comfortable for longer durations. It's a win-win across the board. I think that conversation starts with your local bike fitter. Sheesh, I've spent more time talking bike geometry with Ashley at the Force Training than I'd ever care to admit. I've said before that I think Enve is doing a great job of listening to their customers. They're observing the needs and how people are riding and enjoying their bikes. The Fray is the answer to a lot of those desires. It meets the needs of modern riders and then some. If you're in the market for a new road bike and the type of riding that I've mentioned resonates with you, you should give the Fray a strong look. It resonated with me. In fact, so much so that I bought a Fray frame and I'm swapping all my components from another bike. Which bike? How am I gonna build it? Well, we'll talk about that in the coming weeks. Huge thanks to Enve for inviting me out to Paso Robles to ride the Fray and for reminding me just how much fun you can have on two wheels. If you have any questions, drop them below or shoot me a message on Instagram. I'll do my best to answer your questions about this bike. Anyways, until next time.